And there we go. So good morning and good afternoon to students and teachers from Vancouver to Halifax and beyond. Thank you to Marc-André once again for inviting me to be here today. I never miss an opportunity to spend time with Canada's youth, and I'm always impressed with their commitment to our country and to building a better tomorrow. C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui et de participer à un autre événement organisé par jeunes citoyens du monde. D'ailleurs, je tiens à vous féliciter d'avoir récemment été accordé un patronage vice-royal de la part de son Excellence Mary Simon, gouverneur général du Canada. Quel exploit! Félicitations. As one of your first interviewees back in 2020, I take great pride in the achievements of your students across Canada and abroad. To be granted the vice-regal patronage speaks volumes about the work you do. Congratulations. Today, I am honored to introduce a very respected authority on Indigenous matters and someone who has been at the forefront of reconciliation in Canada, Mr. Bob Watts. Mr. Watts is a much sought-after expert in Indigenous policy, negotiations, training, and conflict resolution. He is from the Mohawk and Ojibwe nations and resides at Six Nations Reserve in Ontario. He is the former interim executive director of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which examined and made recommendations regarding the Indian residential school era and its legacy. I had the honor of serving in the Senate of Canada with former Senator Murray Sinclair and chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, whom Mr. Watts knows quite well. I know Mr. Watts played an integral part in the establishment of the commission in 2009. This was a landmark achievement, and I would be remiss if I didn't extend my gratitude to you. Mr. Watts also served as Chief of Staff to the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Phil Fontaine, where he was a member of the team that negotiated the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement, the largest class action settlement in Canada's history. He later served as Chief of Staff to National Chief Perry Bellegarde and played a key role in historic budget allocations to Indigenous peoples and the passage of Bills C-91 and 92 that were both adopted in the Senate in June 2019. Mr. Watts is a graduate of the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and fellow at the Harvard Law School, where he researched and lectured on the role culture plays in conflict. He has had the benefit of excellent Indigenous mentorship and Western learning, which allows him to work well in both worlds. Some of his Indigenous learning has focused on medicine plants, traditional songs, traditional environment knowledge, and leadership. Currently, Mr. Watts is the Vice President of Indigenous Relations at the NWMO and an adjunct professor and distinguished fellow at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, where he developed one of the first graduate level courses on reconciliation in the country. Mr. Watts is a recipient of the INDSPIRE Award for Public Service and recently received an honorary degree from McMaster University. He has taught, debated, and lectured at several universities in Canada and the United States. I could probably go on for a few more minutes and list some of Mr. Watts' other achievements and contributions to Canada. There are so many, but I think our audience gets it. We have a very prestigious guest here with us. Mr. Watts has an impressive track record and getting things done and encouraging dialogue and understanding among all Canadians, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. That is his strength. He has accomplished so much. There's a reason why so many people view him as a role model and an authority on Indigenous matters. I have no doubt everyone attending today will be deeply moved by Mr. Watts' words and will be inspired to live their lives by fully committing to achieving greater understanding, appreciation, and respect and cooperation among all peoples. Mr. Watts, thank you for meeting our youth today. At this time, I would like to turn the floor over to the official ambassador for for young global citizens, Miss Geneviève Borne, who will help moderate the Q&A portion of this event. Mr. Watts, I'll warn you in advance. I was interviewed by some of young global citizens and bright students a few years ago, and they ask tough questions.
Okay.
Hopefully, you'll be able to handle the heat. Good luck. Bon succès. Bonne chance. Geneviève, à toi la parole.
Thank you so much, Senator Loffreda, for this great introduction. Hello, Mr. Watts. Thank you so much for being with us today. And hello to all our young global citizens. I know every school present today joins me in acknowledging the traditional Indigenous territory we are standing on. So our first question for you today, Mr. Watts, comes from a Vuntut First Nation teacher in Old Crow in the Yukon. Selena wants to know, Mr. Watts, can you tell us about your youth, your role models growing up, and perhaps share about some hardships you experienced, but also good memories that you have?
Okay, well, first of all, let me thank the Senator for such a lovely introduction and to acknowledge him for the leadership that he's displayed on getting so many important matters dealt with in the Senate of Canada and getting them made into law and really significant public policy in Canada. And to thank Marc-André for this lovely invitation. It's a great question. You know, I grew up sometimes living on reserve, sometimes living in town. I was really lucky. I was really close to my grandparents. In particular, my Granny Mel and Papa Jim down at Tyonega Reserve in Southern Ontario. And they were real role models for me. I just loved them so much, especially my Papa Jim. And they taught me a lot about virtues, a lot about principles, how to conduct myself as a young man. I was a little bit scared of my dad, so I'm not too sure what I reflect now about, I learned a lot from him, but I was pretty nervous around him too. He was a police officer, so he made me kind of nervous, maybe like police officers do with other folks. And for larger role models, I read a book about this First Nation chief, Eli Parker. And Eli Parker actually helped write the agreement to end the Civil War in the United States between the North and the South. Really accomplished man, and kind of walked that two roads, the First Nation, the Indigenous road, and the Western road, and walked them both really well. And that impressed me and made me think, maybe I could do that too. In terms of hardship, on reserve, it was fine. Living in town, sometimes there's a lot of racism, a lot of prejudice, and so experiencing that at a young age was really tough. I was really lucky that I had such supportive parents that would go down to the school and talk to the principal and to the school board about creating a better environment. And this is a long time ago. It's not like, we have those processes in place now, but they were really strong people. And to take on the school board to protect my sister and my younger brother and myself, I think was extraordinarily brave, what they did. And so, I really give them a lot of credit and a lot of acknowledgement. But those were some of the things that I reflect on. I was pretty lucky, the strong women that I was surrounded by. And I think that's continued in my life. In our tradition, we're what you would call a matrilineal society. So women are the bosses. And to have so many wonderful and generous and kind and loving women bosses, if you will, I think has taught me a lot about not just sort of my role as a man, but my role as a human being. Thank you.
Our next question comes from Vivian, a grade 5 student at Blessed Sacrament School in Vancouver.
Can you tell us about your university years? What did you study? What made you choose to take this program? What did you intend to do? And did things turn out like you expected?
That's a great question. Thank you. You know, I started off studying communications, and I thought I was going to become a journalist. And I enjoyed sort of the structural part of that, but you know, shortly after into the program, figured that's really not what I wanted. And then I studied behavioral science, sort of understand how people interact with each other, the functioning of a human being, our thought processes, our feeling, our spirit, and I thought that I would be like a social worker or a counselor, maybe even go on to become like a psychologist or something. And I did some counseling for a few years, but then got really attracted to management, to playing a stronger role, not just kind of one-on-one with people, but wanting to talk about how can I help shape structures and how can I help shape institutions more broadly. And so I went back to school, and this is where I went to Harvard University, and I got a master's of public administration. So I was already doing some of that work in terms of public administration, working for government, working for large Indigenous organizations, but that really helped me refine my skills and just added to my toolbox of things that I could bring to bear on some real complex issues. Because it's one thing to be able to deal with issues that, you know, kind of, you know, maybe have one or two layers to them. But when you're dealing with issues of, you know, layers and layers of complexity, combined with history, combined with trauma or drama, it becomes a lot more difficult to sort through those layers and to find a way forward. And so those were some of the skills that I picked up at Harvard. And I can say that every job I've had since I went to Harvard, I've applied those skills to everything that I do.
Wonderful, wonderful. So now we go to St. Francis of Assisi School in British Columbia for our next question.
Our question is it true that culture plays a role in conflict? For example, in the context of the colonization of Canada by European settlers and the terrible damage done to the Indigenous people of this continent?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Yeah, to me, there's no doubt that culture plays a strong role in terms of conflict. One, it helps us get into conflict because some people may have a feeling of superiority over another, or, you know, when you think back to the very early days of European and Indigenous contact in the Americas, many of the European countries didn't even think we were human beings. They debated whether or not we were human beings. So they had this notion of what is a human. They had a really strong kind of superiority complex, and they treated us as less than human. And many times in our history, we've either been treated less than human or like a child. So this is culture being played out. This is culture presuming certain things about other people, whether it's stereotypes or assumptions that may have no founding at all in reality. But oftentimes maybe we study something and we form these opinions about other people without any factual basis to it. And so culture also plays a role in terms of getting out of conflict, of creating understanding between people and being able to expose different groups to like maybe the best things about each other. My own process in terms of dealing with conflict resolution is based on dignity. I really want people to see both their own dignity and the dignity of somebody else or the other people that they're in conflict with. And to me, it's pretty hard to be angry with somebody or want to repress somebody if you see their dignity. Dignity is a big deal. So that's, to me, that idea about culture can get us into trouble and culture can get us out of trouble too. If we're generous with each other, if we have some humbleness about ourselves, and we have the courage to be able to change opinion and change action. Thanks for that question.
That is such a touching and wonderful answer. Thank you so much. Our next question now is from St. Mary's School, also in British Columbia. Here's a question from Joya Devaca. She is in grade 7. Hello, Joya.
You have a lot of knowledge about traditional medicine using plants. Do you feel that our medical system would benefit from integrating more traditional practices? And can you give us some examples of medicinal treatments using plants?
Yeah, sure. That's a big question. Thanks for the question. And first of all, I'd say that there's a lot of the Western medical system that's already taken advantage of Indigenous knowledge with respect to medicine plants, and for the most part have not given credit to Indigenous people, whether it's in North America, Central America, or South America, or other parts of the world. Pharmaceutical companies have learned about aspirin, as an example, from Indigenous people, have learned about other plant medicines from Indigenous people, and have put patents on something that would otherwise be our knowledge, and also never compensated Indigenous people for that. So our medicine knowledge has a big role to play in healing. It already is doing that. One of the things that complements our medicine system is a spiritual system that sits side by side, because many of our healers say that, whether you're making a tea or you're making a salve or you're ingesting something, that spirit needs to go hand in hand with that. So even when you're picking those plants, it's a spiritual process. So when I go and pick medicine, I usually bring out a gift with me, and I put down tobacco, or I put down a gift before I go into the bush. And one of the elders said it's kind of like you're knocking on Mother Earth's door and say, "Is it okay if I come in?" And so you get permission first. And then you never take the first plants that you see. You go further into the bush, because you want to make sure those plants are going to be there next year, or you want to make sure they're going to be there for your kids. So you go further into the bush. And then when you find that plant that you need, it's like a small ceremony for that. You tell that plant why you're picking it. What is the purpose of that? And you leave like a little gift or an offering to say thank you to that plant. So that's all part of the healing process too, is accessing those remedies and accessing that plant in a way that gives dignity and recognizes the sacredness of that medicine. That's going to help that plant do its work, because you've done it in a dignified way and you recognize the sacredness of that medicine. We have elders that are in hospitals. We have rooms that are in hospitals dedicated to ceremony and elder care. We see that happening more and more in Canada. I think it's going to accelerate because the medicines and knowledge that we have, we've been taking care of disease. We've been taking care of other issues for thousands of years, long before anybody else was in this land. So that's the knowledge, the gift that we have to give to the rest of society. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Now let's go all the way to Montreal with a question from Simone Monet School. Hello, Montreal. What is your question?
Hi, hello, my name is Adona and I'm from grade 6. And my question is, what is traditional environmental knowledge and leadership?
Traditional environmental knowledge, I guess in short, really talks about our relationship with the earth and how we take care of the earth. And in our way of thinking, there's a reciprocal relationship with Mother Earth. She takes care of us. Everything that surrounds all of you, everything that surrounds me, comes from the earth. And whether it's mineral or whether it's plant or whether it's from animal, it all comes from the earth. And so we say Mother Earth takes care of us. And then we have a reciprocal relationship. We have to take care of her. And so that's part of traditional environmental knowledge or ecological knowledge. But it's also understanding how the earth works, because our people live so close to the land and have experienced changes in the earth over thousands and thousands of years. It helps us to be able to predict and helps us to be able to act, to understand how to act in a way. And you see this happening. I mean, in Australia, they had all those terrible wildfires. And then people started saying, we should have listened to the Aborigines about how to deal with that so we wouldn't have those terrible wildfires. And so that's traditional ecological knowledge. And part of that leadership is one, being willing to offer that to the world. But the other part of leadership is the world being open to being taught by Indigenous people about how they should present themselves and how they should act on Mother Earth. So that goes both ways in terms of traditional knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So wise and so touching again. Now we're going to cross all the way back to British Columbia. We have two questions from Cloverdale Catholic School in Surrey, BC.
What was your role in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And what can you share with us about your work with the Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair, whom we really hope we have the honor of meeting someday?
Yeah, so thanks for that question. My role with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I was hired on as what they call the interim executive director. First of all, I helped to negotiate the agreement that put the Truth Commission in place, and then I was hired to set it up. So we met with survivors and churches and government, and met with other countries that had had Truth and Reconciliation Commissions to understand how, what are some of the structural things we should put in place so that we could have the very best Truth Commission we could have in Canada, but that it would represent Canada. Because what would work in South Africa or Rwanda or Peru wouldn't necessarily work in Canada. So we had to make it fit into the culture and into the political realm and legal realm that we have here in Canada. So that was some of that work in terms of putting all that together. I had an amazing, amazing team that worked with me to put that Truth Commission together. And then I had the opportunity to work with Justice Sinclair in terms of briefing him and making sure he was well prepared to take over that role of chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They had decided that it was going to be in Winnipeg, and I was invited to go to Winnipeg and work there, but I didn't go. I didn't really want to move to Winnipeg. But Justice Sinclair and I kept touch with each other over the years and continued to work together. Actually, we both do work for Queen's University now. I'm on the board of trustees at Queen's University, and Justice Sinclair is our chancellor. So we continue to work together. And like you, I have great admiration for Justice Sinclair, and I do hope that you all get a chance to meet him.
And now there's another question from Cloverdale School. Go ahead.
What is your message for Indigenous youth across the continent, especially our audience from the Six Nations Reserve? We have worked with many schools and students of the Six Nations during previous interviews.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think my message is that this is our time as Indigenous people. And when we think back to our ancestors, whether it's our grandparents or great-great-grandparents, they sacrificed so that we could have the opportunities that we have right now. And so this is our time. Our ancestors, they prayed and they hoped that a time would come like we have right now. And it's a time of opportunity. And it's a time of huge importance to the entire world. And Indigenous people have a role to help shape the world, to help make the world a better place. Because you look around, there's a lot of things going on in the world and you kind of shake your head and you say, oh, Why is that happening? Well, we have a role as Indigenous people to help heal this world and to help bring people together. From Six Nations, we would say we're bringing people together under the tree of peace. And those roots from that tree stretch out all over the world. So everybody is invited to come together and to share and sit together under that tree of peace. That's our role, is to help bring peace to the world. And I just think it's such a great time. I'm just so happy for, my grandkids that are in, same grade as some of you, grade 2 and grade 4 and grade 7, and just to think of the possibilities. So I'm kind of envious. I kind of wish I was in class with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's hear a question from Saskatchewan, precisely from Alvin Buckwold School in Saskatoon.
That's my student Holden, who's going to ask the question. I believe he's here.
So my question is, can we draw parallels from hundreds of years of history on this continent to the current situation in Ukraine?
Wow, what a great question. I think we can. And boy, it's such a good question. I want to make sure that I give it a thoughtful answer. But, one of the things that I think about is when people think that they're better than somebody else, or that they own somebody else, or they own somebody else's land, then they're going to act in ways that are contrary to the very best of us as human beings. And I think that's what I'm seeing in the Ukraine, and what we've seen in Canada for a long time, is people thought they were better than other people. People thought that our land belonged to them just because they planted a flag on the shore. People thought that they could extend their laws and their ways over us. And that's what you see happening in the Ukraine. And some of those things I think are going to be temporary, because I think at the end of the day, like, justice finds a way of sorting things out. That's what we're seeing in Canada. I mean, justice is finding things out, and we're finding out things about ourselves that we didn't know in Canada. So that's justice is working its way through, and justice is going to work its way through in the Ukraine too. And it's so sad that people have to suffer to try to get to justice, but sometimes that's the road. It's a sad thing. So that's what we've seen in Canada, and that's what I'm seeing in the Ukraine. What a great question. Thank you.
And what a wise and inspiring answer. Thank you, Mr. Watts.
Mm-hmm.
Our last question from our young global citizens today comes from Charles P. Allen High School in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
I was wondering, how far along are we in implementing the 94 calls to action? Is there something young people across this country can do to play our part?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. I think we're in the really early days of implementing the calls to action. We see reports that says, we're making progress in this area, and then sometimes we go backwards. So I think we're still we're kind of like a baby. We're just becoming like a toddler. We're kind of standing up a little bit, but we're kind of awkward and fall down. And I think that's where we're at in terms of our stage. There's huge potential. And I think that a lot of Canadians really want to see reconciliation happen, especially since all those unmarked graves have been found, starting last May in Kamloops. And we keep hearing more and more about that. So people want answers, people want action. And so that's good. As young people, I think, understanding the calls to action, making your own personal plans, making plans for your school in terms of how you can promote reconciliation are all good things. I would go to the Downey Wenjack site. There's a lot of good information there for schools and resources for students at the Gord Downey Cheney Wenjack Fund site. A lot of good resources there, but also talking to the mayor or your chief, talking to your member of parliament, your member of the legislature, become active in your community and demand change. Sometimes people want us to be satisfied with the status quo. Just go along and everything will be okay. Well, that's not true. And I think through COVID, we've shown we can do extraordinary things. We don't have to be satisfied with just the status quo. We should expect more of each other. And I think if all of you youth expected more out of us and expect more out of yourself, it would change the face of Canada. It would change the face of the world. So expect more out of everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Before we say goodbye, do you have a last advice or encouragement to share with us?
You young people, you're so smart, and you have a lot of resources at your fingertips. I think developing those plans and work the plan, having a really strong vision of how you want the world to look, and what you're going to do to help make that possible, I think are all really important things. All of us have a role to play, and we need to figure out how we're going to get along with each other to make all that possible. There's just so much energy and so much potential. So I'm really pleased that I was given the opportunity to come into your circle and to speak with you and to hear your questions. It's been a real honor for me. And I just wish all of you great things. I wish all of you will do great things. And I want to hear about them too. Maybe there'll be an opportunity to hear on a kind of a regular basis about the wonderful things you're all doing to make this world a better world. So Chimigwech and Yawagoa, thank you, merci.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Watts, if I could say one final word, well, it's been a real privilege hearing you, and thank you to Geneviève and all the students, and thank you to young global citizens as usual. But justice always finds a way. I'll take that home with me, and there's hope for what we're going through. We're all going through, and we're all living at this point. So justice always finds a way. So well said, well done. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're giving you the title of young global citizen yourself. And we now invite all attendees today to unmute themselves to say thank you and au revoir and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Midwest, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bum ba da dum bum bum da 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 bum 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 ba da bum bum ba da bum 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 bum.